Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, Michael people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. Here to close out another week with lots to uncover as the sports world does not let up with all that's going on, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Monday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And now that we're just a few days away from uncovering who will be representing the AFC and NFC in Super Bowl 60, that's right, Roman numeral L and X, as we look forward to the games in Denver and in Seattle to see who will represent in what should be a very interesting weekend. And interesting more so from the standpoint, as I go through the storylines and just jump right to it, there's a lot to discuss here throughout the course of this podcast. I want to keep it in a tidy hour and 5 minutes, so let's get cooking. As far as the games itself, I'll start off. I'm not going to go through various or even in particular storylines like I've done before the wild card round or even with the divisional round where we had the one seeds ushered in. Because right now we know that these four teams, where they stand, what's going on, what's happening, etc. And all we need to do is pretty much, from my perspective, unpack what I foresee with these games. And I'll start off with the AFC Championship game since that's the first one on the docket, 3 p.m. Sunday in the Mile High City. And we all know Jarrett Stidham. He is the guy that is the spotlight will be shown on the most with the injury to Bo Nix and him being done for the postseason. Can Jarrett Stidham, against his former team, I might add, be the one to rise to the occasion and do whatever is asked of him to do and whatever it takes to manage the game? Because he's not going to be a guy that's going to overtake the game and win it, and he could lose it. But I think with Sean Payton and what he's able to come up with as an offensive mastermind, I'm sure he's going to simplify it as much as he possibly can, make adjustments on the fly, because how many bubble screens and how many easy passes over the middle and trying to get those 2 or 3 yards, which will be more like runs as opposed to them trying to stretch the field or trying to take shots downfield, where we know Stidham, it's going to be a pretty much fail-safe, soundproof, or even, dare I say, have that safety net for him to not make that big mistake, not for him to throw into tight windows, not for him to, when he faces a pass rush, if he's able to get out of the pocket and run, not to say that he is Lamar Jackson, but if he happens to see some daylight, go with it, take it, because the last thing he's going to need to do is do what C.J. Stroud did up in Foxborough, where he sees the rush and he's just going to throw lollipops up in the air for a defensive back to take to the house, as we saw there with Marcus Jones there Sunday, which turned that game around. So that right there is going to be indicative of how this game's going to go, how Jarrett Stidham is going to perform. I'm sure that the game plan is going to be designed for him to throw no more than 20 passes, hopefully for them to get a lead. It would also be nice for the short field that could be possibly had with Drake May, the quarterback of the Patriots, who has Butterfingers, let's call it as we see it, has fumbled a lot throughout his young career. And if they could get enough of a pass rush to where they could get a strip sack or have him just fumble the ball to the point where they could get the ball at the Patriot 30, 20, maybe even closer to the goal line, that's what they're going to sign up for. And that's what they're going to hope happens there come Sunday for that 3.5-hour period during the AFC Championship game. Because other than that, I can't even tell you what the remedy or what the focus will be on for the Broncos, other than trying to get or play with field position to the point where they could hold the Patriots at bay, not have them extend drives, not get it to a point where the Patriots are kicking at midfield to where the Broncos are getting the ball at the 5-yard line or the 10-yard line. They don't want Jarrett Stidham to go 90 yards, or at least that's what I would think that Sean Payton doesn't want. They want to be able to get the Patriots deep in their territory, have them punt so they can get the ball near midfield or maybe even the 35, 40-yard line, and hopefully get some splash plays, get some big gains on the ground, and next thing you know, maybe they're going into the end zone or lining up for a field goal, because we would think that this is going to be a low-scoring game. In fact, how I look at this game, it could be one of two games. It could be that close game that maybe the Patriots go away in the fourth quarter. So let's say it's 14-12 Patriots, and then they get that touchdown to make it 21-12, and then who knows, maybe Stidham gets the costly turnover there, and the Patriots recover, and next thing you know, it's 24-12 or even 28-12, and the game's over. I can see a game being like that, or Stidham doesn't have it from the outset. The Patriots, they capitalized on short fields or on long drives where the Bronco offense is 3 and out, and then next thing you know, it's 24-6, and it's midway through the third quarter where the Patriots are in a rocking chair type game. That's how I see it. Do I see the Broncos winning this game? Sorry, Bronco fans, I do not. I can't. Unless you're going to tell me prior to that they're going to get a pick six or a fumble recovery for a touchdown, maybe a punt return, maybe even a kickoff return for that matter. Because that's what it's going to take in order for the Broncos to win this game. Now, could Stidham throw a touchdown pass or two in the game? Would I be shocked? Maybe two I'd be shocked, but I could see him maybe throwing a touchdown pass. And a touchdown pass when it's meaningful. Not a touchdown pass when they're down 24-13 with 8 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. That's not cutting it. I'm talking about in the teeth of the game, when it really matters, when it really counts, where he's going to be able to produce some good numbers and not when it's garbage time or it's a mop-up deal. So how I look at it is, I would think that Drake May and their offense, and with the way they're coached by Mike Vrabel, their defense is going to go after Jarrett Stidham. I'm sure they are going to do whatever it takes to try to have him beat that Patriot defense and that pass rush. And there isn't any more to unpack when it comes to this game. I mean, I wish I could tell you, oh, well, if this happens, that. Obviously, you can't predict turnovers or special teams touchdowns or even, let's say, a block field goal or block punt for a touchdown or short field. We can't. Now, one thing I can say is because we know we trust the Patriots and what they have been able to do throughout the course of this year, and if there is one bugaboo that you would have if you're a Patriot hater or even if you're a big-time Patriot fan, as much as you've won on the road this year, and you're 8-0 on the road, but you haven't won in a hostile environment. Obviously, the altitude, that crowd is going to be into it, as you know. They got the home field and the number one seed for a reason. And if they come out firing, and we know their defense is going to be hell-bent on doing whatever it takes to win this game, because a lot is going to be expected for them to carry the mail and deliver them to Santa Clara for a Super Bowl. But also, the blessing that their defense is, the Broncos, it could also be a curse because they could be asked to do way too much. Meaning that if Jarrett Stidham is being forced third and long, and he's unable to produce, where you have a bunch of 3 and outs, and it's a situation where the defense has to go back out there again, and they can only do but so much. So let's say they keep the Patriots to 10 points, and it's in the fourth quarter, and they've gotten them on 3 and outs, and oh yeah, they stopped them yet again. Oh wow, they got them deep in Bronco territory, but the Patriots were unable to capitalize on a first down or a touchdown, so they had to kick a field goal. You can only do but so much of that. And then it's going to come a point where the defense, as much as it didn't break, but it bent, eventually the floodgates will open, and that's where the Patriots will break through. So a lot to really think about when it comes to this game, but there really isn't much as far as a standpoint of if Bo Nix was under center, there'd be a lot more to really uncover, as opposed to a situation where with Jarrett Stidham at quarterback, all right, we know it's going to be simplified. All right, if he's in third and longs, that's going to be a long afternoon for the Broncos. All right, we know about the Patriot pass rush. Okay, we know about the Bronco defense. All right, if there's turnovers, we can talk about all this till we're blue in the face. But I see the Patriots, I can see this game being more close first half, and then there's the one break, whether it's the turnover, and that could happen in the first half too, but I'm trying to remain optimistic to at least have a game for a half. Maybe it's 13-6 Patriots, and hopefully the Broncos get the ball to start the second half. But even that can be dangerous because that's where you get the timely turnover. If you're a Patriot fan, or a situation where it's a 3 and out, and then the Patriots go on down the field and it's 20-6, and then it's uphill for Denver from that point on. But how I look at it is that I could see it being competitive for a half. I'd be surprised if Jarrett Stidham does have a good game, and let's say the Broncos have a lead in the fourth quarter. Could you imagine that? Even if it's a 1-point lead. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to be a Patriot victory. They will go ahead, I will say going away, somewhere in the lines of 24-13, 24-14, something along those lines. And remember, New England has not won in Denver in the postseason in forever. Even with the Brady Belichick era, they were 0-3 there. They lost 2 title games and lost a divisional game in there in 2005. And that was the same year when the Steelers went to Denver the following week, beat them, and then, of course, won Super Bowl 40 against Seattle. So that's how I look at game number 1. Game number 2, now listen, there are many tentacles to go through about this game. Obviously, this is the third meeting between the two teams. The first 2 games were, especially the second game, the Thursday night game, was a classic. The first game, Sam Darnold, had 4 turnovers. I believe all 4 were interceptions. They lost 21-19, and it was a nightmare for the Seahawks quarterback. And to me, he is the main focal point because we could talk about that Thursday night game. And yes, they did come from behind at, 30-14, or was it 30-16? I think it was 30-14. And they were able to come from behind. And even after the Rams scored a touchdown in the overtime, the Seahawks answered and got the 2-point conversion to win the game. And yes, he did thwart whatever hex that the Rams had on him, dating back to the playoff game last year when he was in Minnesota and they lost in Arizona. And then obviously that first game in SoFi when it was 21-19, and they did whatever it took to really throw him off into a tizzy. And then he bounced back nicely in the Thursday night game. Now, which Sam Darnold are we going to see? Are we going to see the guy who has played well throughout the course of the season, and even in the game against the Niners, didn't do much, didn't have to do a lot. It was all Kenneth Walker and Rashid Shaheed who took back the opening kick, which pretty much was the backbreaker to start off the game and pretty much ended it for the Niners at that point. But you'd have to think that Darnold is going to be asked to make some plays here because we know Matthew Stafford's going to be able to make plays, and we've seen Stafford twice in this postseason come from behind to, and I understand it wasn't a come from behind in the Bear game, but in a sense where the Bears had their own backbreaking play with Caleb Williams to end regulation with that touchdown, and even after a 3 and out and the interception by Caleb Williams, they rallied the troops to go on down the field and kick the game-winning field goal, and we saw it happen in Carolina with the waning seconds with that touchdown to Colby Parkinson. So they have mettle, and they are battle-tested. So Seattle, with their defense and with their 12th man and their home crowd, etc., the Rams aren't going to be afraid of that. And we've seen that. They could have won that game in Seattle there on that Thursday night. But we know Matthew Stafford, at least we would think he's going to deliver in a big spot. Will Sam Darnold do so too? Because they're going to have to match point for point here. This isn't going to be a situation where they're going to have the game plan of Sam Darnold throwing 20 to 25 times. All right, he may get 175 yards or close to 200 and maybe throw a touchdown. He's going to be asked to do a lot more. And I understand the Ram defense, pass-wise better, run not so much. And even with Zach Charbonnet out with an ACL, which that's a significant loss. Now, I understand Kenneth Walker had the 3 touchdowns in the game against the 49ers, and he's a very good running back. But knowing that he's going to have to carry the mail, at least the load for that position, and Darnold, who knows if he's going to be thrust into 3rd and longs or situations where the Rams are going to try to get after him, and they have a very good secondary and very good defensive players, led by Kobe Turner, that defensive monster there on the line. And, of course, you have Cam Curl and Kobe Durant, and they have a very good defense. Now, the run defense, a little bit more to be desired. But we know the Ram offense, and we're going to look at that as very trustworthy. With their 2-headed backs, with Kyron Williams as well as Blake Corum. We know about the receivers, we know about the tight ends, and obviously the quarterback, who's probably going to be the MVP of the league this year. So, how I look at this game, to me, I don't want to put this all on the shoulders of Sam Darnold, but if you're going to tell me right now, and just as based on numbers, that if Sam Darnold is 22 for 33, throws for 250, all right, he may have a pick. Now, it depends on how costly that pick is. But throw for 3 touchdowns, I'm going to think the Seahawks won the game. But even that isn't going to guarantee a Seahawks win. And that's where the Rams, with what they're able to do on offense, because unless Matthew Stafford is going to have a game where he's 18 for 36, he may throw for 200, but he throws 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, I would think the Seahawks are going to win the game. But if Darnold's numbers are matched by Stafford and beyond that, you would think the Rams are going to win. And you can't fault Darnold if that's the case. That's where we're going to have to look at the Seahawks defense, depending on how the game unfolds. But how I see it is if Darnold's going to have that type of game, then I would think the Seahawks are going to win. Now, it's not to say Darnold has to go 13 for 31. If he does that, forget about it. They have no shot unless they get 5 turnovers and win the game. But to me, how Darnold plays in this game is going to be indicative of whether or not the Seahawks are going to win or lose. And you can say that about any quarterback. I get that. You can say, oh, Jarrett Stidham plays bad, you're going to lose. I understand. But Darnold's going to have to match wits here with Matthew Stafford in order for them to win. Because this isn't going to be a rocking chair type game where he's 13 for 19, 145 yards like he did with the Niners there just a few days ago. That's not happening. At least that's not how I see it. But as far as the game itself, I like the Rams. I know the Seahawks, and this is what's dangerous about these divisional games or when they're going to face them again. I'm sure the Seahawks probably heard it going into that game against the Niners, despite how depleted that they were on both sides of the ball. But I'm sure they heard that, they just beat the Niners down there. And even though San Francisco won all the way back in week 1, but now they got to beat them again, I'm sure they heard that. And maybe Mike McDonald, the coach, used that as bulletin board material. Everybody's counting us out, even though we're the 1 seed and we deserved it, blah, blah, blah. But now what can he say? This Ram team, they could have been 2-0 against them this year. And by any means, they're not going to be afraid to walk into that building. So I see the Rams, with them being battle-tested, and with the with the Seahawks having the big game that they had against the Niners, this is going to be a situation where it's going to be a lot tougher. And this is where the rubber's going to meet the road. This isn't going to be 41-6. I can guarantee you that. Can the Seahawks win going away? I guess they could, but I don't think the Rams, that's not going to happen. Not under Sean McVay and his watch, the coach of the Rams. Could this be a last possession type game? It could. Just like we saw that in the Thursday night game. But I see the Rams finding a way. They'll prevail. Maybe Sam Darnold again. The kryptonite that is the LA Rams, with the last game notwithstanding, that could come back to roost. I think the Rams, 31-28. Could come down to a last-second field goal, Harrison Mavis. And it even could come back to a last-second touchdown. Why not? 28-24 Seahawks, and there it is. Stafford goes down the field, punches it into the end zone. Maybe the Seahawks have a last shot at it. 2 timeouts with 1:05 to go. And we'll see what Darnold does. But I like the Rams in this game. And I think a Rams-Patriots Super Bowl, that's not what the world wants to see. We've seen that movie before. Obviously, what was it? 6 years ago, 7 years ago, Super Bowl, what was that, 53? So we're going 7 years. And that was a bore of a game. 13-3, Jared Goff, awful. But, and of course, who could forget the game after 9/11, Rams-Patriots. That's when the Rams were in St. Louis, of course. But I think Rams-Patriots, then Seahawks-Patriots, then Rams-Broncos, Seahawks-Broncos, in that order. The NFL does not want the Broncos in this game. Listen, Roger Goodell's never going to admit that. The powers that be down on Fifth Avenue aren't going to admit that, or Park Avenue, wherever their officers are. They're not going to admit that, but let's face it. As I said the other day, when the Broncos beat Buffalo, because everybody knew that if Josh Allen got to the championship game and got to a Super Bowl, forget about it. Everybody in America would want to see that. But when the Bills lost in that fashion, he spit out his Cabernet Sauvignon, and when he took his first bite of his Caesar salad, finding out that Bo Nix broke his ankle, he spit that out also. So if he swears, oh, that's fine if the Broncos are there, I get it. Over 100 million people are going to watch the game. But if it's Seattle, Denver, you're going to get harkened back to that Super Bowl in MetLife. What was it, Super Bowl 48, where the first snap of the game went over Peyton Manning's head and the game was over. And it was a safety. You're going to get visions of that. That Seahawks defense against Jarrett Stidham? I mean, come on. Who are we kidding? And Matthew Stafford, Jarrett Stidham? I mean, seriously? So I think the NFL would rather see in that order Pats and Rams, followed by Seahawks and Pats, Rams, Broncos, Seahawks, Broncos. Now, as far as news and notes, and I got a lot of them here, people, so let me get right to it. To think that the Buffalo Bills, and everybody knows I'm not a Bill fan, so I have no interest by any means. And I get he's been there 9 years and has not gotten to a Super Bowl, has lost 2 championship games. And you could argue whether or not that the road was clear for him because there was no Patrick Mahomes and to a lesser degree Lamar Jackson, although the Bills have beaten Lamar Jackson, obviously last year and even years prior to that in the postseason. But because there was somewhat of a clear path, although it had to be on the road, that they looked like after the win in Jacksonville, they could be full steam ahead on their way to Santa Clara. Of course, it got derailed in Denver, as we saw. And for the front office, Terry Pegula, the owner, who, for whatever the reason, after firing Sean McDermott, promotes Brandon Beane to president of football operations. Where that came from, I don't know. But let's face it, McDermott got a raw deal here. That game Saturday did not fall on his shoulders. If anything, I blame more Josh Allen, if you listen to the podcast on Monday, where 4 turnovers, and understand he carved up that Bronco defense in the second half. But again, he threw a terrible pick in the third quarter. He also had bounced the pass to Khalil Shakir, which could have been a screen for a touchdown, overthrew Dawson Knox, which could have been a walk-in touchdown and would have ended the game. And also the interception, Brandon Cooks. Now, I understand it's more on Cooks than Allen. And to me, that was an interception. I also talked about that on Monday too. But how does that fall on McDermott's shoulders is beyond me. And I understand they're moving into a new stadium and maybe they want a new look, who knows. But that was weak sauce. And I get it. Sean McDermott is not Vince Lombardi. He is not Chuck Noll, Tom Landry, Don Shula, name any all-time coach. I get it. But the guy did win 98 games throughout the course of his career. And I understand he was 500 in the postseason. But that game wasn't on him. If that game was in Buffalo and he lost, then you want to fire him? Okay. I get it. You had home field, and if they were a 1 seed and lost in that game, all right, fine. I get it. That's not on Sean McDermott. So to me, that was just terrible timing for him to be gone. And here he is in the podium trying to stick up for Buffalo, and not only just the team, but the fan base, the city, etc. And then they just let him out on his ear, where they promote the GM to a president. And now to make matters worse, yesterday they had this press conference to where the GM, well, now the president, Brandon Beane, is coming out saying that, oh, the coaches were the ones that selected Keon Coleman in the first round there a couple of years ago, where the team needed a wide receiver in the worst way. And even though Brandon Beane came out and said, well, hey, I do have say in this, but the coaches picked it. Well, why you already kicked the man out on the curb, and now at the same time you stab a knife in his back and throw him overboard? On top of taking Keon Coleman and just with he and the owner, if you're watching on Spotify or on YouTube, swinging him back and forth, and then you swung him overboard. I mean, what is happening here? Pointing fingers at everybody else and not pointing at yourself. And then Terry Pegula, who, from what I heard earlier this week, doesn't face the media. And I believe he hadn't faced the media in 6 years. And he was part of this disaster yesterday in Buffalo where he cut off, and I didn't watch the whole thing, I watched bits and pieces, but he had to cut off Brandon Beane at times and overstep his boundaries to where he had to defend him or to throw in his own 2 cents. And it just made this look like a 3-ring circus. At one point I'm saying, what is this? Is this Jerry Jones and the Cowboys? Just a disaster there. And I know a lot of the fan base, I just actually spoke with somebody doing a live stream, which I usually do every Thursday, 9:30, a podcast pregame, 9:30 a.m. on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do so, people. And I thank those who got me to and past 1,000 subscribers. So one more time, people, if you haven't gotten on board and it's your first time watching this, please, I implore you to do so. Hit that subscribe button. As an independent creator, doing this thing, real sports talk, true sports talk, no clickbait, rage bait nonsense. I'll talk about that more on the back end. But, I mean, that was just a travesty to what took place there. And not taking any ownership, not taking any accountability. I know Brandon Beane did come out and say, hey, obviously I have to take my own responsibility for all this and what happened. Because, yes, he didn't get any other big-time wide receiver. I know Amari Cooper last year, but how did that work out? And this year in the draft or free agency, they didn't get anybody there to bring and help out Josh Allen in big spots. And on top of that, that defense was Swiss cheese. I understand that they tried in the last couple of years bringing in Von Miller as a pass rusher and also bringing in Joey Bosa. But how about some defensive back help? How about some linebacker help? I mean, nothing. They had zero reinforcements there in that defense to stop anybody. And as it was, Bo Nix went down the field and got the go-ahead score before they tied the game in regulation. And oh, by the way, Josh Allen overthrew Dawson Knox, which would have ended the game, and Sean McDermott would still have a job. Just a disgrace. I mean, how that all unfolded, I couldn't believe it. And you have to think, if you're a head coach that's looking for a job, and I understand it's Josh Allen, and if you're an offensive mind, you certainly want to work with him. But what you saw there yesterday, is that an organization that you're really going to have 100% faith and trust in? Knowing that the GM pointing fingers or the president now and Terry Pegula cutting him off and that's a mess. No thanks. They're lucky that they have Josh Allen there because I don't think any coach would want to go there. I mean, here they are, they're trying to do damage control and all they did was just more damage. I mean, you can't make it up. And then you have John Harbaugh as officially a Giant coach. And that's weird also because I understand that Harbaugh tried to shoot this down. But he said that, hey, this is still a collaborative effort. But guess what? Harbaugh reports to the owners. John and Chris Mara, the son. Wait a minute. So now Joe Shane, who I understand is on thin ice as it is to begin with. But now it's a situation where the coach could actually bypass the GM and go directly to the Maras and the Tisches in this regard? I mean, you got to be kidding. So when you see that happen, I just want to bring up a quote here. And I said Chris Mara's the son? That's his brother. I got that mixed up. I'm thinking another family. So I also wanted to confirm that too. Chris Mara is John's brother. And of course, John is going through some health issues, and obviously we wish him well. So my apologies for Chris saying the son is his brother. But I want to pull up a quote here, which he said, and this is what Mara said, I want to make an impression from an ownership standpoint. I think I did that, which he did, but the ownership. Yeah, it was a thing where, I know, I'm trying to find these quotes here. They're pretty much saying that both Joe Shane and John Harbaugh that, oh no, it's collaborative, it's collective, but yeah, he's going to report John Harbaugh to the ownership. How's that going to work out in the grand scheme of things? Because you already know that when stuff goes down and when personnel decisions, whatever, John Harbaugh's going to say, hey, you guys got to get me another wide receiver, or hey, I need a defensive back, or hey, he's not going to go to Joe Shane. Or how do we know he's going to go directly to Joe Shane first before he even goes to the Maras and the Tisches? So that's a little dicey if you ask me. So we'll have to wait and see how that's going to develop as we move it along. The Titans hire Robert Saleh. You can only hope that he learned from his first go-around with the Jets. And obviously he has a young quarterback there. All I would hope for Cam Ward's sake is that whomever the offensive coordinator is, I don't know if they're going to keep the guy or they're going to bring in his own Robert Saleh, that is. I just hope that they groom this kid. Saleh, we saw what happened there with Zach Wilson. That was just an unmitigated atrocity. So one more time, you'd only hope he learned from his first go-around and not a situation where he's just going to focus and zero in on the defense and let Cam Ward hung out to dry and whatever. The Dolphins hired Jeff Hafley. Who? What? Former defensive coordinator of the Packers. Remember, the Packers' former executive is now the VP of operations and the GM down in Miami. Kansas City's bringing back Eric Bieniemy as the offensive coordinator, which that could be a good thing with all the success that they had. And I understand they won a Super Bowl without him, but the first two were under Bieniemy's watch, so let's see what happens there. The Vikings extended Brian Flores, but could still opt out for a head coaching job, so that doesn't mean he can't go to Pittsburgh or anywhere else. From what I read, although Flores is in the mix there in Pittsburgh, they also interviewed Mike McCarthy yesterday, and right now, based on what I read, he is the front runner to get the job. Although Chris Shula could be a dark horse, the defense coordinator out in LA, or was on the staff there in LA. So I got to wait and see. That's with the Rams, of course, not the Chargers. Because Jesse Minter is another guy that's also on the circuit there for a head coaching job. John Lynch, Niners saying bye-bye to Brandon Ayuk. That will avoid $27 million in guarantees that he's owed, I believe, whenever the start, April 1st this year. And we know that the offseason begins in March, quote unquote. So Ayuk, and that was a disaster. Ayuk, who held out all of training camp back in 2024, got his deal literally days before the start of the regular season, did not play well the first 6-7 weeks, then tears his ACL, and then did not play at all this year and missed a lot of meetings and even rehabs and things of that nature. That's just been a mess. So Ayuk is done. And then lastly, Baker Mayfield. I understand he's the guy that has the chip on his shoulder, and a big one at that, and taking shots at his former coach, Kevin Stefanski, who's now the coach in Atlanta, talking about how he was jettisoned, how he was thrown out like a piece of garbage, shipped to Carolina, didn't even speak to the guy upon his departure, and tweeted, I believe it was on Twitter, tweeted where he said, "Can't wait to see you twice a year, coach." So those games against the Falcons should be rather competitive, to say the least. So I just thought to throw that in there as I close out the NFL. Now, I know we're days removed from the national championship, but I'll spend a couple of minutes on this and talk about Indiana being an all-time great team. Now, Indiana, they did not trail in the game. They were up 10-0 at the half. Hurricanes answer, and then they got the block punt for a touchdown, which was enormous because you kind of felt that the Hurricanes were coming. And that made it 17-7. Hurricanes answer back, make it 17-14. And then the play that's going to live not only just in Indiana football, which is not a lot, but now it'll be emblematic, whether they win another national championship or not. 4th and 5, what was that, the 12-yard or 14-yard line, wherever it was. Or 12-yard line, because it was a 12-yard touchdown. And for Mendoza to not only break a tackle, but to dive, literally stretch out into the end zone no matter how many hits he was going to take to get in that end zone to make it 24-14. I mean, that was the icing on the cake for what was, let's face it, not only a miraculous run, but a historic run. 16-0. Indiana Hoosier football? What? You got to go back to Lee Corso. What was that, in the 60s, early 70s? And even Michael Penix, who they had a hot minute of success there a few years back when they were in the mix as far as maybe being a top-ranked team in the nation before he transferred to Washington. And then last year they had a big year under Curtis Rourke, who was their quarterback, and it all fell in South Bend, where they played very conservative, and even though Kurt Signetti with his bluster, etc., I was like, wait, who's this guy? Oh, he's puffing out his chest. And then this year, I mean, what could you say? And even though 24-14, and then it was 24-21, Hurricanes are coming back. Then you had the field goal there where they had to stop them, touchdown at the end of the game. And even though the Hurricanes, I don't know if they put a scare into the Hoosiers, because to me a scare would have been if that pass was completed, Carson Beck, which was intercepted, of course, but let's just say for argument's sake, if that was completed where the ball was inside the 20, then that's when Indiana would have faced some pressure. Because let's face it, they faced those pressure in this game. Now listen, Miami played well defensively and, of course, hung around the game. But Indiana showed that toughness, and they had a big special teams play, which I won't say turned the game around, but it certainly helped. Because who knows how that would have turned out if that block punt wasn't recovered for a touchdown. And all you can say is that you tip your cap. What a masterful job that Curt Cignetti done. And then as far as being an all-time team, I can't put them in the ranks of whatever Notre Dame team you want to go back 100 years, or any Bear Bryant Alabama team, or any Alabama team of Nick Saban. The Hurricane team, you want to say the 01 Hurricanes, you can argue that. Any Nebraska team, Oklahoma and the Barry Switzer, the Nebraska team in the 90s. I mean, there's a million teams. And I haven't even scratched the surface. But I will say this. They are an all-time team for this reason. They're the Hoosiers. They're Indiana. They're a basketball school. Bobby Knight. The last undefeated team in college basketball in 1976. And now, although you got to transfer to the football team, and here you are, undefeated and the football team. They did something that we may not ever see again. And I understand we live in a world of transfer portals and NIL money that people are going to look at Indiana and say, hey, we could do it too. That it's not going to be all about the teams in the SEC or the teams in the Big Ten. And obviously Indiana's in the Big Ten. And that's not to say that James Madison's of the world or Tulane's. I'm sure they're going to think, hey, this team came out of nowhere to be a national champion. But that's where I believe that they belong in the discussion. Are they the greatest college football team of all time? Absolutely not. Because if this team played against those aforementioned teams, I would think, and we'll never know, of course, but they get destroyed. And if you want to take the 01 Miami team, for instance, how many NFL players were on that team, as I've said a million times, compared to how many NFL players are on this Indiana team? I mean, come on, it's light years. So you can't compare. And that's why you have to look at this as one of an all-time great teams. And I get it. It comes with a little bit of a caveat because this is an older team. This isn't a bunch of 18, 19, 20-year-old kids. These are kids that are already in their early to mid-20s. I understand that. But that's not just Indiana. That's everywhere in college football. Please, when Georgia was winning championships, who was their quarterback? Stetson Bennett. When they won back-to-back on that second one, he was 25 years old. Carson Beck isn't 20 years old. He's 23 against the team they just played, Indiana. So it's not just Indiana that has all these players that are mature and men that when you look at their age, they could be in the NFL. I get that, but they're not the only one. So when I look at it from that lens, yes, do they belong in that top 5 of all time? I can't say that. Even the USC teams, I got to forget them. I can't say that. But you know what? As far as an all-time team, for what they've done and what they were able to do, and not even just this year, but last year, because this wasn't a program that was built 2, 3, 4, 5 years where they finally got to the mountaintop. This sucker happened in 2 years. 2. This wasn't, oh my God, this was a long-awaited championship. We had to suffer. I mean, look at Michigan recently. Let's just take them, for instance. Jim Harbaugh, he had to suffer through TCU and the abomination that was. And losing playoff game, lost to Georgia before that. And yeah, I mean, it's a situation where it took 3 years for them to get that title. This wasn't anything that happened overnight. I want to make sure, did they lose to Georgia in that game? Michigan, Georgia. Yeah, because they played, that was the year Cincinnati played Cincinnati, Alabama. I gotta look that up. Michigan, Wolverine. Michigan football playoff history. As I'm doing this on the fly, people, so you gotta bear with me here. Because I believe that was the case. They did lose to Georgia. They lost in the first round. Hold on a second. I gotta make sure I'm right here, people. I'm not gonna give you erroneous information. That's not how I operate. And obviously these games were just played recently. So when I take a look at, no, we don't want Rose Bowl. Yeah, lost to Georgia in the semi. And then obviously TCU, and then they beat Alabama and then Washington. So I was right the first time. So unlike what Michigan had to go through in order to get there, and I understand it took 3 years, but Michigan obviously hadn't won since 97, where Indiana nowhere near a national title until this year. So that's why I believe, now let's see what happens next year. They're not going to have the quarterback, and the brother of Mendoza is going elsewhere. He's in the transfer portal. So what do they do for an encore? That's what's going to be fascinating. But this team deserves all the flowers, all the bouquets, all the accolades that they could get. And congratulations. There isn't anything else more I could say about what they did this year, and they get all the respect in my eyes, because obviously even after they beat Oregon, I was like, I guess I got to give them a little bit of respect, but I need to see more. Well, I've seen enough, and obviously they put the cherry on top, winning a national championship. And I know you had the Mark Fletcher get into the fight with the guy at the end of the game, and I mean, that's obviously not a bad look for the Gators. And let's see if the Gators come back next year. Obviously, they're going to need a quarterback. I'm sure with the success that they had this year, maybe they get somebody from another team. Who knows? Does the Mendoza brother, does he go down there to Miami to maybe become a Hurricane? He'll pull a Ray Allen leaving Boston to go to Miami, if that's the case. Way back when, to use a basketball reference. So that's what you have with the college football. Let me pivot and move on, as I'm going to get to the baseball, similar to what I did on Monday. That's right, because NBA, NHL, there's a couple things to discuss, but I want to get into the baseball for this reason and this reason only. Now, twofold. I got to start off. No, I'll save the Hall of Fame next. The Yankees, they finally get their man. I was doing the live stream yesterday, every Wednesday, 12 noon on YouTube. Literally, it had to be 3 to 5 minutes prior to the news breaking down or breaking out, where I said that the Yankees are going to sign Cody Bellinger at this point. I mean, we saw the deals that have happened here this offseason. A lot of the big-time players, whether you're Pete Alonso, Alex Bregman, Kyle Schwarber, to a lesser degree, Bo Bichette, Kyle Tucker, they both got 3 and 4 years respectively, that as much as Bellinger's camp wanted 7 years, he's not getting that. And considering that a lot of these guys are getting off the board, that the Yankees, I'm sure they're going to get their man, whether it be 5 years as it was, or an opt-out, let's say 1 year now, and an opt-out considering that they have the CBA at the end of the year, where the Yankees finally, maybe not the Yankees finally, more so I think Bellinger capitulated to think that, well, I'm not going to get 7, I'm going to settle for 5, and that's fine, I want to be a Yankee. And sure enough, that's where he stays in pinstripes over the next 5 years, $162.5 million. So the Yankees get their man. But in the process of that, the Mets, who, let's face it, other than the 3 acquisitions that they got early this offseason, Devin Williams, Luke Weaver, Jorge Polanco, have done nothing. It's been all quiet on the Western Front. And for whatever the reason, the last week was either do or die, or they were hearing it so much from the fan base that they had to do something. Obviously, they were in the running for Kyle Tucker, and thankfully that didn't work out. But not only did they get Bo Bichette, as we talked last week, but Tuesday night, they trade for Luis Robert Jr., the center fielder, where they gave up Luis Angel Acuna. And I get it. They have a surplus of guys. But I will say, the guys that they traded away, Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander, Scherzer for Acuna, Verlander for Drew Gilbert, are no longer on the team. Gilbert was part of that trade to San Francisco for Tyler Rogers, the reliever, who's now in Toronto, I believe. And then come to find out this morning, or last night, I should say, as the Mets traded for Freddie Peralta and Tobias Myers, who actually pitched in Game 3 of that wild card game against the Mets, and pitched well, for Jet Williams, the infielder-outfielder, and Brandon Sproat, who obviously was one of their pitching prospects down on the farm, who had a taste of the major leagues last year. Pitched okay, pitched well in a couple of starts, but did not earn a victory. And how I look at those 2 deals, Robert, they needed a center fielder in the worst way. I understand they had to give up Acuna, which was tough. Young guy's 23 years old. Robert's 28. and he's getting paid, I believe he has a club option after this year, $20 million this year, had a big year in 2023, had a lot of injuries the last 2 years, but a guy that has power, speed, play center field, we're set. It's a deal the Mets had to make. They did not have a center fielder going into this year. And really over the last couple of years when you think about it. And as far as Peralta goes, obviously he's an upgrade. He's getting paid $8 million this year. He's a free agent after this year, so he's a rental. Now, is it a situation because of his relationship with David Stearns? Is it a scenario where maybe, just maybe, there's a hometown discount involved? I don't think that would be the case. Peralta's probably going to look at a deal somewhere close to what at least Ranger Suarez got, 5 for $130. Do the Mets negotiate now until the time they break for spring training at the end of March? Or do they let the year go by, try to sign him in the offseason, which is obviously very risky if he has a carbon copy of last year where I believe he was second in the Cy Young voting in the National League. He won 17 games, the most games in the National League, on top of him for the third straight year, throwing at least 30 starts or more. A reliable arm, eats innings, very good pitcher. Is he an ace? He's going to be an ace of this team. Is he Garrett Crochet? Is he Tarek Skubal? Is he, when healthy, Garrett Cole? Is he Paul Skeens? He's not those guys. No. To me, he's in that second tier. He's that. He's not Yoshinobu Yamamoto. He's not even Blake Snell. Gotta throw him in there. But I would say he's in that second rung of starters in major leagues where you can look at and say, oh yeah, that guy's, he's a 1A. Bonafide 2, can be an ace, but that's the thing, that's the danger of it. Because if you had an ace and you put him at number 2, not a lot of pressure. He's coming at the price of an ace, which means that he's going to have to deliver. And this isn't Milwaukee, this is New York. So that 17-9 or 17-6, whatever his record was, he's going to have to bring that with him. He can't be 14-8, or dare I even say 14-10. He's going to have to come close to matching that in order for him to really earn his chops as an ace starter in a Met rotation where they absolutely need it. So keep that in mind, Met fans. But you got to be ecstatic. Now, am I doing backflips and cartwheels? No. But I'm ecstatic that the Mets had done something here over the past week. And I know the Bo Bichette press conference, John Heyman butchering that whole, oh, do you see, is this a 1 year? I mean, listen, I know he signed for 3, but he has an opt-out. I mean, he was awful with that, the way he phrased that question. All he had to say was that, hey, you signed a 3-year deal, you have an opt-out after this first year. Do you think, no matter how big of a year, good of a year, win a World Series, will you opt out? And then Bo Bichette's like looking around, and then the agent had to step in. So you already know where that's going. So that's what, it's a World Series a bust for that matter, because if he hates it here, he'll go elsewhere. Or if he gets injured, and he, typical would be the Mets, gets injured, plays half the games, although he's productive, but he'd probably have no choice but to stay because he's not getting $43 million if he is injured. But if he plays 155 to 160 games, and he bats .310, and he gets anywhere between 180 200 hits, on top of hitting 18 to 23 home runs, 90 to 100 RBIs, and has that type of batting average, he's probably going to say, deuces, I'm out. And he has every right because he has an opt-out. So we'll see. Then you have, I never mentioned Nolan Arenado getting traded to Arizona. Well, obviously that's old news. I'm just bringing that up now. But now here's the other baseball thing I got to get to, which is infuriating. And I actually got back and forth with people online about this. And I get it's online, JAYREELZ, we get crazy, but come on. Do you know who you're talking to here? Carlos Beltran makes the Hall of Fame. 279 lifetime batting average. Almost 2,800 hits. Big time clutch in the postseason. 435 home runs, 300 steals, etc. All right. Obviously not a first ballot. Sign stealing scandal in Houston. All right, fine. But you know what? I can see him being a Hall of Famer. He was a very good, above average center fielder. Excellent player, former Rookie of the Year, etc. Fine. And I have no offense to this player by any means necessary. This happens to fall on the writers. So if anything, I have a bone to pick with them. How in the hell is Andrew Jones a Hall of Famer? Now, I understand the 10 gold gloves. That's probably what got him in. Because the power numbers did not. He had 1 year where he led the league in home runs and RBIs. Granted, he had 51 home runs, had 100 and whatever, 20-something RBIs. batting average that year was not good. And other than plate appearances and games, at bats, etc., he does not have a lot of black type. He doesn't have on-base percentage. He doesn't have slugging. He doesn't have OPS. He doesn't have any of those numbers. The Gold Gloves, I get it. He has the hardware. But for them to look at Andrew Jones, and here's all you need to know. A lifetime 254 hitter, less than 2,000 hits, and he was in the top 10 in MVP twice in 16 years. How is that Hall of Fame worthy? And even when you look at the years, out of the 16 years, he may have had, if you're being kind, 6 Hall of Fame years. If you play 16 years, you got to have half, at least half, 8 lock Hall of Fame years. And some of those years, you got to ask yourself whether or not he deserves it, where he hit 26 home runs and had 94 RBIs, or 35 homers, 91 RBIs, or numbers like that, 25, 84, which those are not Hall of Fame years. And here's the most, forget it, even you can put the average and the MVP votes and all that aside. Here's the one thing that's even more damning on him. Did you know that his first year of eligibility, and you probably think, all right, how much percentage did he get of the vote? Now, he got 76 or whatever it was, or 78. I think Beltran got 78, Jones got 76. You're probably thinking, oh, Jones, I don't know, got 20%, 25%, and slowly but surely built up to where he was able to get the 75% needed in order for him to be enshrined in the Hall of Fame. First time on the vote, 7%. He was 2% away from being extinct. Out of here. You'd have to hope for the Veterans Committee or whatever committee that's there to maybe even think to put Andrew Jones in the Hall of Fame. How does somebody go from 7%? If you're a steroid guy, that's one thing. Because, of course, they're not going to vote for the steroid guys unless there's some that feel that he deserved a vote. But he got 7% this first time on the ballot, and now he's in the Hall of Fame. I don't think there's been a disparity like that ever. So the voters told you when he first got on that this guy is in the Hall of 7%, and now all of a sudden he's a Hall of Famer? Why? Because they couldn't vote for the steroid guys in? And as it is, Andy Pettitte got 48% of the vote, who got caught with HGH, and A-Rod was 40% of the vote. And I said this before, and I'm going to say this now. Hear me out. If the voting is going to be like this moving forward, where it's going to be the whole, the very good, Scott Rowland last year, I mean, seriously, Scott Rowland? He also made it on his Gold Gloves, too. He was a good offensive player. He wasn't great. And Andrew Jones had good offensive numbers. Not great. The Hall of Famers were great. Elite. Dominant. He was not that. He was a great defensive center fielder, but not a great offensive player. But here we go. If the voters are going to go down this road, and I'm not a voter, but I'd rather have the steroid guys in. Put them in. Start voting them now. Let me see Bonds. Let me see Clemens. Let me see A-Rod. Let me see Manny. Let me see Sammy Sosa. Let me see Mark McGwire. Have them all go in. Because they're more deserving to go in than the Andrew Joneses of the world and the Scott Rowlands of the world. And if they're doing it for integrity, whatever, what? Scott Rowland and Andrew Jones? Those guys aren't Hall of Famers. And it's not even an insult to not call them Hall of Famers, although they are, but it's like, come on. Let's just put everybody in the Hall of Fame. Chase Utley's another one he's on the ballot. He's going to get in. He had 1,800 hits. Never won an MVP. Good second baseman. And was a good player, a clutch player. But again, is he Ryan Sandberg? Is he Jeff Kent that's going in? And he had to get the Veterans Committee to have him go in. Jeff Kent, who, all right, wasn't Roberto Alomar at second with the glove, but was good. He wasn't butchering balls left to right. The guy hit 381 home runs for a second baseman. I mean, come on, and won an MVP on the same team when Barry Bonds was on the team. That's all you need to know. Oh, it's a disgrace. I mean, the writers are just clueless. And these people are at me online, oh, you don't know baseball, shut up, stop it, this and that. What? Please, baseball is my first love. I forgot more baseball than you probably watched your entire sports, in all the sports. All right, let me get off this. NBA is a lace up the high tops. Now, I guess we could cool off on all the Knick panic talk after last night's game. Where, now if they would have lost to the Nets last night, somebody probably would have been shipped right now. And let me refresh my page just to make sure nobody's been dealt. The Knicks had lost 9 of 11 going into the game last night against the Brooklyn Nets, including an MLK Day where the Dallas Mavericks came in there and just beat the brakes off of them. 114-97? What? So, rumblings, whether it's Mike Brown, whether it's Karl Anthony Towns, and with the Nets coming in, and all they did was win the biggest margin in franchise victory, 120-66. So I think for at least one day, we could chill out on the sky falling on top of Madison Square Garden. Although you have to wonder what has gone on here over the last few weeks. I could see if they had injuries. I know Brunson had the ankle injury, but obviously he's responded. But you have to wonder whether or not the days of Karl Anthony Towns are numbered. All these trade proposals that I'm seeing. Now, is it going to happen? Who knows? The trade deadline is, I believe it's 2 weeks from today. In fact, it is. 2 weeks from today, February 5th. So, who knows? I'm sure even if the Knicks start to go on a little bit of a winning streak, you're probably going to hear something come down the pike. More rumors or Karl Anthony Towns getting dealt. Now, we all know this is boom or bust for the Knicks this year. With the way the East is, I know the Pistons have been very good. They've certainly piggybacked off the year they had last year, and now they're at the top and look like they could cruise to a 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. But for this Knicks team, and teams are going to go through lulls, ebbs and flows, etc. 9 of 11, that's significant, but you are still in January. If this was in March, as you head into the postseason, maybe I'd be more concerned. And I'm not a Knicks fan, as you know, but I wouldn't be overly concerned. Now, maybe they do need to tweak here, tweak there. Mike Brown, I don't know how he's going to handle this. I know he's more of a players coach guy, whatever, etc. And the Knicks team obviously is deeper than it has been in years past. But yeah, a lot of these guys, I can't say I can trust in big spots other than Jalen Brunson. Mikal Bridges, I can't trust. Karl Anthony Towns, I can't trust. The guys off the bench, I'm not going to get crazy about. I mean, can't be all on Brunson's shoulders. But with the NBA, that's pretty much been, at least for this week, the focal point. I know Giannis came out and said some stuff about chemistry, selfish play after getting blown out against the Thunder. And I know Jimmy Butler tore his ACL. So even though the Warriors, with him re-upping with that 2-year deal this year and next, and he will be an expiring contract next year at $56 million, I might add. But they have no thoughts of trading him. Now, that whole thing with Jonathan Kuminga I talked about on Monday, they'd be stupid to trade him despite the fact that Kuminga wanted a trade request out of Golden State. Do they fulfill that? If I'm them, I wouldn't. Steve Kerr, you just got to grin and bear it. Make it up. Do whatever it takes to keep this guy happy. And I'm not trying to make Jonathan Kuminga out to be the next coming of Anthony Edwards or whatever, but the guy's a very good player. And they need a little bit of youth. They have a lot of older players on that team, as you know. And Butler was one of those guys, and obviously he's not there for the remainder of the year. So we'll see how that shakes down with the Warriors as they're in that 7-10 range in the Western Conference. But besides that, again, not much to really get into. Pistons currently have a 6-game lead in the East, 5.5 over the Celtics. Same for OKC, 6 in a loss, but 6.5 ahead of the Spurs. I know the Rockets, they've actually played a little bit better. Now they're 4th. They were actually, I believe, 7th a couple of weeks ago. And yeah, that's it. I got nothing else to really add there. As far as the schedule here for the course of these next few games, or days, I should say. Houston at Philadelphia, Denver at Washington. This is today, of course, people. Games that matter. Golden State at Dallas. Lakers at Clippers. San Antonio, Utah. Houston at Detroit. That's on Prime Video. And you also have Prime Video games tonight. The Prime Video is Golden State, Dallas, and LA, the Battle of LA. Tomorrow on Prime, Houston, Detroit, followed by Denver, Milwaukee. Then you have the rematch. Remember, they played this in the opening week. And, of course, it's not being shown on Prime based on how bad they were. And that's the reason why they probably scheduled it early on. Indiana at OKC. So that's why I believe that game was on, maybe on ESPN. That was probably the third game of the year, which very rare you get an NBA Finals rematch the first week of the season. You usually get it mid-season where the basketball season is warmed up, and obviously they probably would put one of those games after the football season where people could rally around the TV to watch. But no, OKC is hosting Indiana tonight in a not-so-good NBA Finals rematch. Boston at Brooklyn. Phoenix at Atlanta. That's tomorrow. Now you have 3 ABC games, which is usually the case with no NFL games. 3 o'clock, Knicks in Philadelphia. Golden State at Minnesota. That's 3 and 5:30. The nightcap, Lakers in Dallas. In between, not much there. And then Sunday, not much there either. But Dallas at Milwaukee. Brooklyn at the Clippers. Miami at Phoenix as they're on a long West Coast trip. Toronto, OKC. That's not a bad game. Denver, Memphis, Sacramento, Detroit. That's your NBA there. NHL, take a trip around the ice as I lace up my skates. The news and notes of the week, you had the Sabres re-up on one of their players. Gave him a 7-year, $48 million deal, Josh Doan, as the Sabres try to get themselves in the playoffs for the first time forever. I talked about that a couple of podcasts ago. Then you have the Sharks, who are trying to wheel and deal, bringing in Kiefer Sherwood from Vancouver, who have finally snapped that long losing streak, but they are out to sea as far as this year goes. So they try to bring in another reinforcement to go along with that young core with Macklin Celebrini, Will Smith, etc. So you like what you see there as far as San Jose trying to see if they can make an impact in the Western Conference, and maybe, I believe they're right now last in the wild card discussion, but I'll talk more about that once we get into February when the Olympic break comes, because there's not going to be any hockey in between. So we'll get into wild cards and where teams are in the standings at that time. You also had a homecoming where Jonathan Toews, who's now with the Winnipeg Jets, came back to Chicago. Standing ovation, rousing ovation, video, tribute, etc. First time back. We all know Toews, former captain, number 1 pick, 3 Stanley Cups. Will obviously have his number raised to the rafters at some point there at the United Center. 4-minute standing ovation at that. Well deserved for him. We understand the health issues that he's had to deal with over the last couple of years that were COVID related and respiratory and things of that nature. So it's great to see him get his day, especially back in the Windy City for the first time, even if it was in a different uniform. And then you had a goalie fight the other night, San Jose and Florida, where Sergei Bobrovsky and Alex Nedeljkovic, I know I'm going to butcher his name, but you had a scrum in the corner, and I don't know why. In watching the highlight, maybe that was something that was brewing. Maybe in the crease there was some high sticks or some maybe shots to the shins to where Nedeljkovic decided to go into the corner and push and shove and get involved to where Sergei Bobrovsky skated the length of the ice. And next thing you know, you got a big-time goalie fight, which I loved. Now, it wasn't great. Listen, it was not Felix Potvin and Ron Hextall back in the 90s. Go on YouTube, Felix Potvin, Ron Hextall goalie fight, or just type in Maple Leafs Flyers goalie fight. That was one of the all-timers. That it was not, I can promise you. But at least you got some fisticuffs for a guy who loves the rough stuff. And obviously in this day and age, the NHL, you rarely see that. But you got that the other night where San Jose did beat the Panthers and then lost to the Lightning, I believe, last night, or maybe it was 2 nights ago. So you have that. If you're a hockey fan to watch, or if you didn't see, you can check that out on YouTube. But besides that, I know Luke Hughes, he's not going to have surgery. He's going to rest it out, especially with the Olympic break coming up. He's had an upper body injury. The defenseman there with his brother Jack Hughes, as you know. But besides that, listen, if I go through the standings, it's same old, same old. I know the Islanders losing to Seattle in Seattle yesterday as they snapped their 4-game losing streak now are tied with the Penguins. They have 59 points, who are now both 7 points behind the Hurricanes in the Metropolitan Division. And, yeah, everything else is same old, same old. I know Anaheim's now on a bit of a surge. Remember, they were in first place for a time about a month ago, and then they fell back, I think, as far as maybe 6th. Because when you look at those teams that are clumped together, Anaheim, Seattle, San Jose, LA, they're all separated literally by 2 points. And then Edmonton is 3 points ahead of them, second place in the division. So Anaheim is certainly righted the ship as they've rebounded nicely to get themselves closer to the top of the Pacific, which they're only 3 points behind Edmonton and 5 behind the first place Golden Knights. But besides that, that's what you got. And as far as the schedule goes, tonight, Vegas and Boston, Buffalo and Montreal, the good games. Florida at Winnipeg, although Winnipeg's dreadful. Pittsburgh at Edmonton. Detroit at Minnesota. Tomorrow, Vegas at Toronto. St. Louis, Dallas. Philly at Colorado. Anaheim at Seattle. Rangers, San Jose, Jersey, Vancouver. Nothing much there. Saturday, Sabres at the Islanders. 1 o'clock game, afternoon. Montreal, Boston. Tampa, Columbus. Florida, Minnesota. Washington at Edmonton. And then Sunday, Colorado, Toronto, Jersey, Seattle. That's pretty much what you got there. Nothing else to really write home about with the NHL. And then lastly, with the tennis, as I bring out the tennis racket, this has been as quiet of an opening here this first week, or first 3 days of the tournament. No upsets, nothing major. The big news was really Stan Wawrinka, a 5-set, 4-hour marathon that he was able to survive. But the players that we would expect to be there have been there, both on the men's and women's side. Barely breaking out a sweat. I know the other big news was Naomi Osaka, who at the end of her match, I got to think of what the girl's name was, how that ended. It was a very good match, 3 sets where Osaka prevailed, but then when she got to the net, her opponent gave her pretty much just like a handshake and then walked off, not even a handshake and a tap of the racket. It was more or less handshake and walk, and then Naomi say, hey, what was that for? And she still had words and she was shaking with the umpire. Let me pull up her name. I think her name is Sorana. Let's see. You know me, people. Got to make sure I get this accurate. The player that was Sorana Cirstea. I guess I'm pronouncing that right. Cirstea. So, get to the net. Very brief handshake and walk to the umpire where Osaka is exasperated, dumbfounded. Hey, what happened? And even as Osaka approached her there by the umpire's chair, she's just saying something and trying to pick up what the microphones are saying. And yeah, that was it. And let me see. Cirstea is from Romania. So 35 years of age. So obviously she's been around. I never heard of her. I don't know where she's ranked overall. She's ranked 41st in the world. And it's the first time I'm even hearing about it, to be honest with you. And not that I'm following tennis on a day-in, day-out basis, but when the big events, the 4 slams of the year come, of course I get myself well-versed in what's going on and what's happening. But yeah, so that handshake certainly was not one of a welcoming, a warm one for that matter. So I'm sure no Christmas cards will be sent to either household when we get back to the holidays at the end of the year. But those are really the only stories. Nothing else to really get into. I don't know what to tell you, people, as we close the lid on another podcast. I thank you for carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about the toy department of life, the wonderful world of sports. And as I mentioned earlier, and I'll say it now, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, people, please do so. I implore you to. I got a lot of content coming out, not even just with the podcast, but shorts on a daily basis to chronicle what's happening on that particular day's events in sports. I also have live streams, 3 of them, Monday and Thursday at 9:30 a.m., high noon Eastern time on Wednesday, as well as vlogs. I got another one that's coming out this Sunday, part 2, a father, a son, and the Steelers 2005, and the Steelers Super Bowl 40 run. Make sure I got to say that correctly, JAYREELZ. I got that. I got other vlogs that are coming down the pike before the end of the month and even into next month for that matter. So you definitely want to stay tuned and locked on the channel. And I just passed 1,000 subscribers, so hit that subscribe button, people. Real sports talk, true sports talk. Like I said, no clickbait or rage bait. And if you want to hit me up with any questions, comments, suggestions, you can do so at the following: on YouTube at JAYREELZ, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ Podcast, or JAYREELZ on Instagram. Twitter, JAYREELZ1, just a number. Also Twitch, the streaming platform, JAYREELZ1, just a number. And the old-fashioned way, the JAYREELZ Podcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people, in the blood and the DNA since birth. And I'm going on 2 years doing this full time. So this is where I'm going to need your help, people. Hit that subscribe button. And I got some opportunities. I got some partnerships that I need to share, which I'll do so going into next month. So it'll help out the channel big time. So keep yourself locked in, because as long as I sit in front of this microphone and camera, I promise I will deliver nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury, my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ Podcast always comes correct, directed, and in full effect. From the South Bronx to South Beach, from South Central to South Pacific, and all points beyond. Peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ Podcast, on the flip, baby.